Hi, everybody. Just make sure this is working. Great. So I'm Randall DeBastiani. I'm the founding partner of Anderson Lane. We're an AI-native global macro investing firm. I had the privilege last year of hosting a fireside at this conference with Brett Hurt. And Brett literally walked off the conference and signed his exit papers with ServiceNow to sell his Austin-based company, Data.World. And I thought at the time, how are we going to top that, right? And then Han told me the guest for this year was Fernando Fabre. So Fernando is the CEO of the Kauffman Fellows, which is the preeminent VC education organization and network organization in the world. He also was the former president of Endeavor, which is the premier network organization educational for entrepreneurs in the world. He previously was also a GP with MatterScale, investing in startups, and he still somehow finds time to teach at Columbia University in New York, both about entrepreneurship and about the VC experience. So please join me in welcoming Fernando Fabre.
That's very kind of you. Thanks so much. Just to get started, I really want to thank Han for inviting me, and Alan for all the work that he has been doing, and all of you for being here, Randall for preparing the questions, and I'm genuinely happy to be here. I've heard of the iFly Consumer Summit for now almost 3 years. And I'm so happy that I finally got invited. I feel like very special. So anyway, thank you everyone for being here. All set.
Oh, fantastic, thank you. And look, Fernando, I think before we talk about AI and its impact on the VC and the entrepreneur experience, one of the amazing things about having you today is you have both the experience as an investor, but also a perspective across the ecosystem. And I think it'd be nice to talk a little bit about the direction of travel up front. So over your career, MatterScale, Endeavor, coming into Kauffman, what have you seen change over that period of time in the ecosystem?
So I'll try to be as brief as possible, but it's sort of the 25-year time span that I've been traveling the world, meeting entrepreneurs, meeting VCs, and teaching as well. So if I think of lessons learned that are relevant for today, from the Endeavor experience, I was 15 years there, I think it's the magic of compounding that everybody understands, compounding interest. The magic of compounding of what's called the entrepreneur mafias, and I know mafia sounds like a bad word, but think of PayPal mafia, this idea that you have relatively young, talented people launching a startup, hiring a bunch of young, talented people in critical positions, and the startup takes off vertical. And in a few years, all of that talented young group of people have a couple $1 million on their left pocket and a lot of learning opportunities, which means that at an exit, this is particularly of PayPal when eBay acquired them, you have at least 100 people that worked at PayPal that are now millionaires, if not, a couple million or whatever amount, relatively young, that they left PayPal to start something else. And something else means YouTube, and something else means Tesla, and something else means LinkedIn, and a bunch of stuff that came out of that. So that the compounding of a network of an entrepreneur mafia, I've seen it every single time. And it started in Silicon Valley 70 years ago. When you think of Mountain View, California, in 1950, it had 6,000 inhabitants, that part of the world. That was it. But Fairchild Semiconductor was there. And Fairchild Semiconductor, for those who don't know the story, but one of the founders left and started Intel. Another one left to start Kleiner Perkins. The head of sales left Fairchild to launch Sequoia, Don Valentine. The head of marketing left Fairchild to become the first investor in Apple and the first CEO of Apple. So Silicon Valley has this compounding network effect for 70 years, but we see the same thing in Colombia, and if we were here from Latam, there's this company called Rappi, and the Rappi mafia jump-started a whole ecosystem. So I think the lesson for me with all these years looking at Endeavor is the value of tying yourself to an entrepreneur mafia that you can pull talent from and investors from. I think comparing that to the value that I see in Kauffman Fellows today, I'm probably in between. What I get from Kauffman today is the value of trust, and how trust between a partnership. So entrepreneurship and venture capital are high friction as a feature, not a bug. You want friction because you want to make contrarian decisions. If you make consensus decisions, you're not going to make money. So contrarian decisions imply a fight with your partners, because you come up on Monday and say, Randall, I want to come up with this idea for our startup, or I want to invest in this company for our fund. If you're not telling me that that's the dumbest idea that you've heard in a while, I'm doing my job wrong. It's consensus, then it's contrarian. That means that you and I should have friction and fight. And we're not genetically embedded to trust each other. That's not how humans work. So what is the process that you and I have to build, either at our partnership startup or our venture capital firm, that allows us to reach conviction of an investment opportunity or a strategic shift, a new product launch, while managing friction, not minimizing friction, because then we become, how do we manage the friction so we still trust each other, even though every Monday you tell me I'm an idiot? So those, I guess, are the two lessons, that the compounding of network effects and the importance of trust in partnerships that I am obsessed and passionate about.
That makes a lot of sense. With the friction and the process that gets in place with the entrepreneur and the VC, that really clarifies some of the aspects of being a good VC and investor. I wonder, on the point on compounding on the networks, how do you see that sort of expand out? Where does a GP or investor become a good investor, yes, but also a good network builder and a good firm builder?
So specifically from a VC perspective, if I get asked the question of the difference between, what matters more, becoming a good investor or building a great firm. In fact, the entire curriculum of the Kauffman Fellows program is split into how to become a better investor and how to build better firms. But to me, the relevant question is the difference between being a good investor and a great investor. And I think the latter, you become a great investor when not only you're good at selecting investments, but you're good at making your firm make good investments. So the question that I love asking VCs, I think most VCs spend all of the time talking about making great investments, not enough time about how they are making everyone else at their firm help them make great investments. So the question that I love to ask VCs, and I promise that I say with all, I love VCs, I love entrepreneurs, but you ever had an oyster, it's gonna sound very cruel, but an oyster life that you put some lime on it and the thing twists all over? You wanna see a VC twist, ask them the question of how have you become an effective investment committee member at your firm? It's not how are you a good investor, how do you make the rest of your firm become good investors? And that's what makes you a great investor, because then you can compound your skill into the rest of the firm, that I think matters a whole lot.
It makes a lot of sense. There's a lot changing in the world. We're living in pretty interesting times. And it strikes me that there's some analogies with VCs and entrepreneurship, right? Both are making decisions under uncertainty. Both are making decisions without all the data. At the same time, saying that a VC is sort of like an entrepreneur sounds a little bit like flattery, right? It's sort of a different role. So where do you see that to be analogous? Where do you see similarities and differences with that analogy?
I think what I hear most of the time is VCs are not entrepreneurs. I hear that all the time, and I think there's, to some extent, there's been sort of a bad rap about being a VC, and I think we deserve that in part because of the lack of discipline shown in 2020, 2021 of just literally throwing money out the window and burning it. And Twitter didn't help also with anybody in Twitter and their grandmothers were VCs in 2021. So I think we deserve that because we lost the sense of discipline. So I hear the opposite. I hear VC is a very comfy job. You just sit down, take money from here, throw it over here like darts, and then enjoy your life in a yacht. VC is the opposite of that. It's the most entrepreneurial thing. VCs are entrepreneurs, and I think it's the most controversial thing that I've said in 2 years. VCs are entrepreneurs. And I mean specifically the person launching a venture capital firm, Han, for 10 years, has hustled every single day to launch iFly Ventures. And that means that if you're going to raise a venture capital firm, that means you're going to raise a first fund, and you need to raise, let's say, $50 million. Imagine you're a startup founder that to get started, your pre-seed round has to be of $50 million, and all you have is a PowerPoint. Han came up with a unique vision of the world, a thesis, which founders do all the time. He built a team, he built the product, and he went and raised money for it, and he executed. And then he has to adjust his assumptions for Fund 2 and Fund 3. Han is an entrepreneur. VCs are entrepreneurs. And it's just as much of a hustle, if not more, to launch a successful venture capital firm. And I'll finish with this, which we just published a report last week. And in a way, we compare, you have a startup founder and a VC founder. Imagine the startup going from a pre-seed round to then a seed round, a Series A, a Series B, and keep going until IPO. And Han launching a Fund 1, a Fund 2, a Fund 3, a Fund 4, until hopefully one day a Fund 12. So I think it's very comparable to say a VC raising a first fund is similar to an entrepreneur raising a Series seed. A VC reaching a Fund 4, that happens in about 12 years, is comparable to a founder raising a Series B. And then a founder reaching from Series B to an IPO is similar to Han reaching a Fund 12 and becoming the next Sequoia. The percentage graduation of seed to Series B and Series B to IPO is exactly the same percent of graduation from Fund 1 to Fund 4 and from Fund 4 to Fund 10. Exactly the same graduation rates, and they're very low. So, sorry, long answer to say yes, VCs are entrepreneurs.
So I'm convinced. The statistics help me. I like data. Though I want to go a little bit deeper on it. So with that analogy, how would you think about judgment within it? So making those entrepreneurial decisions under risk. What separates good judgment there from just mere confidence? Or maybe it takes a little bit of both. And how do you play in pattern recognition and the wider network we were discussing? Exactly.
I think that is a key point of the big difference between entrepreneurs and VCs. I think the way I like to think of it is it's difference of timing and speed. If you're an entrepreneur, you launch a product today, and if in 2 hours the product is not getting enough traction through the landing page on your funnel, you can pivot immediately and switch. So pivots are these things that define startups all the time. If a founder and the partnership that the founder has built is a collection of decisions, sort of small experimentation to reach traction, the problem in VC is you cannot do that. The timing and speed are completely different. Han launches a Fund 1 of $50 million. He cannot pivot in a month. He has an investment mandate that lasts 4 years. So in 4 years, he can change his strategy and his thesis. So pivots are for startups, not for VCs. And the second problem you have is the feedback loops in startup world, and they're instant, real time, that you know if you have traction or not. In venture capital, it's this weird thing where you don't know if you're a good investor in about the first 12 years of your career. So right now, sorry, Han, and I'm pointing over there. I don't know where Han is right now. Han has been 10 years in venture. Nobody here knows if he's a good investor or not yet, not even himself. Because you make investments, and those investments take a very long time to become successful in a consistent manner, because if he gets one big hit, maybe he was lucky. So the feedback loop in venture takes forever. And I'll close with this quote that I love from an LP. I was interviewing him, and he said, startups are about revolution, and venture capital is about evolution. And when you think of those two words, at the end of the line of the revolution or the evolution process, you have the same meaningful change, something big change, big time, but the revolution changes much faster. So both VCs and entrepreneurs aim for this massive systemic change on a thesis that they have, but entrepreneurs will get there faster than the VCs. So all of this to say that decision of judgment under uncertainty terms In startup world, it's a little bit faster because you get the feedback loops. In venture, it takes a very, very long time to make those decisions.
Got it, got it. Let's shift a little bit to AI. I'd be interested in your thoughts. You know, it's a big word and includes a lot. How do you think about the difference between sort of AI as an investable system in a target business, AI as a tool, maybe used within a firm, and AI as something outside that maybe change the playing field?
So, at the risk of looking like an idiot in a while, but I have a very peculiar point of view on AI that comes from me taking enough matrix algebra in the past and suffering with that, but doing a good job, and me taking enough courses in probability also, I'm talking about 30 years ago, where I cannot do any of that stuff today, but I know enough to understand that at the core, an LLM is a combination of matrix algebra and probability, which means that every LLM in the world is designed to give you a probability of the most likely letter or word or string of text that comes after, or action that comes after a prompt. So it's a probabilistic model. And when you think about that, then I have a 16 and a 12-year-old daughter, and I'm obviously concerned of what's their job in their future. So I started to think about this. All right, so if you split, if every job is a combination of inputs and outputs, right? The way that I like to think about AI, of where it's going to be most useful and less useful, is in think about the predictability of inputs and the predictability of outputs. So jobs where inputs are highly predictable and outputs highly predictable, AI is going to do a fantastic job. Bookkeeping, financial accounting, where the inputs are certain. Give me a general ledger and I can produce a trial balance and a P&L, a balance, and a cash flow statement. That's exact. That's 100% predictable inputs and outputs. The opposite of that is highly unpredictable inputs and highly unpredictable outputs. That's entrepreneurship, that's venture capital, that's psychotherapy. Think of psychotherapy as a client walks into your door and you have no clue what's ailing them, what trauma they had in the past. It's completely unpredictable. We have total unpredictability if you're going to be able to help that patient or turn them worse in a few years. So that's where I don't see AI being that very much helpful, because it is a probabilistic model. So the way I think of what makes sense to invest in AI, or what makes sense to think about tools for your company in AI, is AI should replace jobs where there's a predictable input and a predictable outcome. It might help you in between, and I don't think, and this is where I might be completely wrong if I don't understand enough, I don't think AI can help you in tasks or jobs or services with unpredictable inputs and unpredictable outputs. Sorry about all that diatribe about my thinking on.
I think that's a very useful framework. Maybe to take it one step further, can VCs and investors in general then use AI to improve their decision making?
Right. So if you buy any into this, imagine that you put a chart, inputs, outputs, predictability from completely predictable to completely unpredictable. What you can also think is there are different seniority levels to a job. So venture capital, Dani is over there, she leads our network, and we have about 300 fellows, if not about 1,000 graduates, and 300 of them are on this WhatsApp channel of AI and AI tools. And every single one of them, the tools that they are building are tools to replace the predictable input, predictable output part of VC, which is sourcing, like scraping data, creating investment memos, which is very, very specific. But none of them are building tools to make decisions of the craft of venture. In venture, you get paid for judgment under uncertainty, highly unprobabilistic, contrarian views, which is the opposite of probability. So every VC in the world, every single one, it became table stakes to have an AI that helps you sort of do the job of an analyst, of an associate. But I see a clear line that pretty much stops between associates and principals, probably. And I think the same thing is going on in big accounting firms, in law firms, where law firms still need to hire analysts and associates, because otherwise in 20 years they're dead. Who do you promote? But they're going to hire a lot fewer people into that because of obviously AI doing the job. So long answer again to say that certain junior positions in highly predictable inputs and output jobs, tasks, are being replaced and do a fantastic job. What it means for somebody like Han, by the way, I'm glad he started as a solo GP or talking about that, because yes, now Han can compete with billion-dollar venture capital firms because he has an army of millions of analysts helping him at least do that part. He still cannot compete in the sense that he cannot sit in 1,000 boards. He doesn't have the time to that. So AI can do some part, not all of it.
That's interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Do you think that it also impacts how small firms can compete on the entrepreneurial side?
It helps you see everything. If you can scrape enough information and have your agents do that, I think it can help you with term sheets, legal documentation a lot faster, which saves money. The typical legal work for a Series A is going to cost you $50,000. So with AI, I think you can do it much faster. I mean, you still need somebody to stamp it, but I think it helps. Certainly helps with fund administration. So all of those tasks, yes, it helps a lot. The bottleneck still, I think, for the smaller VC firms is if your VC firm is one that wants to do high conviction, small number of investments, meaningful checks, and you want to be very active supporting your founders, it's you. That's a human supporting a human. You cannot outsource that to an AI platform and tell the founder, talk to my AI whenever you have a problem. No? So that's still the bottleneck that you have. That's why VCs make money. It's not all the other stuff around. It's you make money because you make yourself available with the time to support your founders. And I don't think there's a solution to that yet. I don't think AI is going to tackle that, or not the current version of LLMs that we know.
Got it. And in the framing of sort of the more junior mechanical jobs being replaced and there being an opportunity to have an army of analysts, is there a Jevons paradox framing where actually maybe it's you kind of keep the number of people or even scale the number of people at your firm and you just make them incredibly enabled, so 10x enabled people?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think the hope is that that's what happens in AI, where the accounting firms, the legal firms, everything that is a partnership that has this very clear analyst, associate, senior associate scale, all of them rely on promoting from within for the future partnership. Otherwise, they're dead. So and you need a pool of applicants if you want to be highly selective of the person that takes the helm in the future. So that means that if they're smart, they cannot start firing every analyst and stop hiring. They still need to bring more. So yes, it's how do you make them a lot more productive? Not to sound too repetitive, but the challenge is, so if you think of it as a pyramid where at the base becomes much wider because now you have millions of people instead of thousands of people doing that work. But the narrow part of the pyramid is the same length in that when it comes down to a judgment decision, that's where AI stops being that incredibly helpful. I'm sure we can still find ways of being helpful, but the bottleneck becomes higher at the top of how many judgment calls can a partner make. When the pipeline became now millions instead of thousands, you still have only 24 hours a day.
That makes a lot of sense. And maybe to take that further, I mean, it sounds like it underscores the importance of the VC expression and the muscle behind it. You have a phrase you sometimes use, which is that VC is sort of going from VC brain to VC muscle. What does that muscle kind of look like?
So I think there are a lot of VCs, a lot of entrepreneur support organizations, let's call that their idea of supporting founders is to look at the founders and clap your hands and say, go, go, go. Good job, keep going, keep going. There are other VCs that think that the real value is by having this massive platform where you go to the entrepreneur and basically tell them, give me your company, outsource your company to me. I'm going to take care of sales, talent, go-to-market, pricing, everything, right? I think all of that is table stakes, and you can or cannot offer that. There's the big difference, the contrast in venture capital. Think of Founders Fund and Andreessen Horowitz. Founders Fund is literally a firm that says, here's a check, see you later. I don't want to be on the board. They don't like board seats. I think it's too litigious for that. Call me if you need anything. That's it. And Andreessen is sort of the opposite of that, of no, here's a check and outsource your company, and we have a team of 600 people to help you. I don't care about that at all. I've been with founders enough times to think that the real value, the muscle that a VC should have with a founder is, the biggest constraint for the founder, I believe, is not so much sales. You can hire people for sales, and you need to raise money to hire people for sales. Or I think the biggest constraint for founders is prioritization of the things that they should be focusing on, and deprioritization of the things that they should be stop doing right now. Muscle in VC to me means helping founders prioritize and deprioritize. And that means deep conversations and being embedded into the entrepreneur mindset, where you're not telling the founders what they should be doing, you're helping the founders navigate the decision-making process. That's so complex to do, because it depends on every founder, the way they live, the way they think about their thesis, their startup, the stage of the startup. That is real muscle. And I think founders appreciate that the most. So one thing at Endeavor that I learned, at some point we had something like 1,000 entrepreneurs active in the, I think today it's probably 2,000 entrepreneurs. And some of them are multi-billion-dollar, like Mercado Libre and Globant and Checkout.com and all these great companies. And Endeavor, we had this litany of services, go-to-market, this, and conferences, and all of them, boards, and advisors, and mentors, and everything. And when founders publish something about their success, they never quoted any of those services we offered as meaningful to them. But we're like, wait a minute, we made that introduction to the client, and the client paid you $1 million, and you don't even remember that. No, founders don't remember any of that stuff. It's weird, but they don't. But what they do remember is that time that a mentor, an investor from Endeavor, we asked him, should we sell our company to this buyer? And the mentor said, you're crazy if you sell it right now. Don't sell that because of ABN. Like, help them make that decision. They remember those key things. That's muscle. At least that's where I'd like to be, and that's where I hope our Kauffman Fellows, our VCs, develop that muscle. That's the difference. Again, sorry, a very long answer, but this is very interesting.
That's super helpful. I'm interested in that sort of brass tacks example of the muscle and the actual strength. What should an entrepreneur from their perspective look for, that sort of trusted conversation for a sale? Are there other things they should think about? And how do they tell the difference between strength and value add muscle versus maybe just flexing?
Yeah, signal from noise if you want, or Twitter VCs, tech bros versus real meaningful engagement. Unfortunately, there's not much a founder can do when you're fundraising to get to the point of having signals that say, yep, I want to partner with the VC and not with this other VC, because all the VCs are pitching in a way, and they can promise you anything. The only thing I can come up with, it's some sort of an intuition feeling. So you cannot teach this, I think, but it's intuition, and sorry for the sort of, thing I'm going to say now, but I don't know the name. There's this Supreme Court in the US case where years ago, the Supreme Court had to decide on a case of nude art versus pornography. And the judges had to decide, is this porn or is this art? And the judge leading the case said, well, I don't know how to explain the difference, but I know it when I see it. I always come back to saying it's kind of funny, but I believe that entrepreneurs picking their VCs, there's no, I don't know how to explain it, but you know it when you see it. After you have that conversation with a VC, it's a blink, it's a thing you feel of saying, this person gets it. I want to work with this person. It's again, sorry, I don't have an answer other than follow that blink of intention.
Don't worry, let's go to an even harder question. So this is a consumer conference, and so let's talk a little bit about culture, because culture is essential for consumer businesses. And I think when we think about it, it can be make or break. So how do you think about culture, and then how do you think about how investors intersect with it?
Randall is very good because he asked me something in the prep club about culture, and I went off on culture. I'm from Mexico City. I've been in New York for 18 years now, a U.S. citizen now, but I'm old enough to remember when people talked about Mexican culture as this thing, I'm thinking, what is the Mexican culture? And there's still the stereotype of some laziness, or they don't show up for work or late for meetings and whatnot, right? I always ask the question, if I ask a question and you reply to me, well, it's the culture, I immediately think of you as a lazy person. Culture is the laziest possible answer that you can give, because culture is not a genetic switch that you have in your head. Culture is endogenous. It's a response of the framework and institution that you live in the instant. And I'll give you an example where in Colombia, when we asked the question in Bogota, why are there no entrepreneurs here? Same thing happens in Japan, by the way. And the answer is, it's our culture. Our culture is that we grow up and we go to school and we find a job at a big company, at a telco, or at the government, and that's what we do. That's our culture. And you think of that answer as, yeah, there's this millennial history of genetic Colombian code that makes them not wanting to be entrepreneurs. And then, and that was forever. And then this company came out of nowhere called Rappi, and SoftBank offered, I think, $1 billion out of $3 billion valuation transaction, made the news. Rappi grew like foam, vertical. And these were very young guys doing Rappi. And Rappi, when you think about it, is a very, very simple company to think of. It's super hard to do, but people think it's easy because, it's a guy on a motorcycle taking my money and buying stuff for me and bringing it to my house. People think that's super easy to do. And in a weekend, every Colombian young person wanted to be an entrepreneur. The cultural switch of I don't want to be an entrepreneur to I want to be an entrepreneur changed in hours, where every person now you go to universities in Colombia, everybody wants to launch a company, and there's startups everywhere popping out of the street. So culture changes like that. It's a response to the institutionals. When I think of consumer culture, consumer products that aim for cultural change, my thinking is that, yes, you can change culture if you're lucky and if you do the right things. I think Starbucks, whether you like the company or not, the coffee or not, but Starbucks changed the culture for Americans' appreciation for good coffee. I think it was the first company that really started off doing that. It changed an entire culture. So yeah, I think consumers, consumer products especially, change cultures. So the point of all of this is to say, don't assume that culture is fixed. It's not genetic, it's endogenous, and it changes all the time.
And so for entrepreneurs that are operating maybe outside of a typical environment, maybe outside of Silicon Valley or outside of the US, what do they really get about it, about culture, that maybe some others don't? Those who say, okay, well, it's just culture and they don't move ahead, versus those that actually are able to move forward. Are there one or two things that you see that are common?
I think it's very hard. It's the reason why when I talk about entrepreneurial culture, think of it as my job in the past as building local ecosystems. The product is, I want more entrepreneurs in this city. That's what I was selling, no? If you think of it. So it took me a decade to understand what were the endogenous traits of the culture at the city that prevent having more entrepreneurs. And it came down to a product that I actually now would tell everyone that the way that a city can have better entrepreneurs, it's to have very good food and restaurants and coffee shops and art and good schools and good police. Because in the end, you can only have strong entrepreneurial ecosystems if the founders of Rappi and everyone that works for Rappi or the PayPal of whichever city you want stays in that city. If they start leaving, you lose that. You lose the entire cycle that comes after that. So that's for a very specific product that it took me a while to understand what are those things that you need to build an entrepreneurial culture in a particular city. If I'm doing boba tea or whatever is my product, you have to go deep into understanding what are the cultural, those endogenous ingredients that make a culture be what it is today, and then figure out what the product should alter or should assess. I know this is the most vague advice that I can give you, but it's the only example I have is precisely that. It takes time to understand the endogeneity of culture and those ingredients.
Let's turn a little bit to ecosystem and compounding. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the PayPal mafia here in Austin. We also have the Trilogy mafia. But the reality, I think, is that many networks don't turn into compounding mafias or networks. Oftentimes, they're just a list of names in a CRM. So how does a network go from that? How does the compounding ecosystem form? And what are the right actions to bring it about?
Well, the reason why I use the word mafia, entrepreneur mafias, instead of just saying entrepreneur networks, because I think mafia is this idea of you're part of the family, and the godfather or the godmother takes you into their circle of trust, and you're in, but we have a set of rules and processes that you have to abide with, and if you break them, you're out of my mafia, and not in a good way. And if you were part of the Peter Thiel, Elon Musk mafia years ago, as an investor, for example, you've made more money than than any other investor, because you have the Tesla, the SpaceX, the Palantirs, you're part of that mafia, you're in. But if you offended that mafia in any single way, you're out completely, and you're never going to see any company related to that, no? So, and it's very important to think of if I'm a founder today, the best advice I have for founders when I talk about entrepreneur mafias is I do believe that a metric of your success as a founder should be measured not just in the revenues of your company and the valuation of your company and even how much money you're going to make about the company or even how many employees you have, anything that makes you proud of your company. All of those are good measures of success, but you should try to start measuring the success of your influence as a founder in your particular ecosystem. I think going back to the Colombian example of Rappi or Checkout.com started in Dubai or Mercado Libre in Argentina, PayPal in the US, I think it's when they think of themselves as let's start to measure the influence that we have on a total ecosystem, they become cultural icons. They become the reference for everyone else, and you want to be into that position. So I think network, if it's a CRM, it's not going to work. It's how do you have meaningful influence over that CRM, and that's where you have to sort of find your own way. I'm surprised at Austin that there's no Dell mafia. Maybe there is, I just don't know. Maybe a small one, but it's what happened at Dell, because it created a lot of young millionaire talent, I'm sure, with stock options. Why didn't they left Dell and started a whole new, whatever, revolution in Austin? So what was happening there that other companies were able to think of OpenAI or even Uber? If you're in VC right now, or even a founder, you probably have somebody that worked at Uber for you, because they have that mindset of continuing to do the network. So some organizations do that very well, others not, and I think founders need to be intentional of, I want my company to be the icon PayPal of the future, because that benefits you, benefits the culture. That's how I think of building your own mafia.
Makes sense. It seems like there's a vision component as well. It seems like changing the world is common in Silicon Valley mantra. I wonder if you see that component as well.
There are certain elements, like for example, it's, so you're the founder, you have key employees, and one of your key employees tells you tomorrow, you know, I want to leave and I'm going to start another company, that is somewhat related to what we're doing right here. There are two ways to respond to that. And one of them is getting really angry and trying to prevent that from happening. And you sign me an NDA and a non-compete and get out of my life and I'm going to, right? And the other one is, are you taking money? Can I invest in you right now? I think the latter makes you eventually win over the long term by helping your own people build the next big thing. I think that's the Reid Hoffman magic. I think that's part of the Peter Thiel magic, is that they've always been saying, oh, you want to leave my company? Great. How much money do you need to start the next one? It's not just money, of course, but it's a whole range of things that you can do that starts with leadership, of course. No?
Fantastic. And I guess you mentioned earlier the longer cycle for VCs and how long it takes to get that feedback. For the LPs in the room that are thinking about emerging managers and how to get a vision on that, it strikes me that maybe there's some other things to think about other than the return cycle. And how would you think about that in an ecosystem and in a character perspective?
Great. So if you want to invest in venture capital, in a venture capital manager, the first question you need to ask is, do you have track record and what are your returns, of course? And if you don't have good returns, well, if you're a new person in VC, the question is different, but if you've been in VC for long enough, like maybe 10 years, well, show me your paper returns as a show of track record. But that's question one, and that gets answered in 1 minute just with the data room. The best questions that an LP will ask a general partner, and I learned this by talking to a bunch of endowments, and I love this question, which is, all right, VC, so you're raising your next fundraise. Tell me, when was the last time that a deal got blocked in your investment process? And a deal that you blocked or someone else at your firm blocked your deal? Because what the concern of an LP, of course, can you create returns? Sure enough. Do you have a compelling vision about the future of the world? Sure enough. Those conversations will happen, but for the LP, the worst thing for an LP would be, I invest in this manager, in the GP, and the partnership implodes in 4 years because of the friction, and then I'm left with a thing that nobody's running, and now I have to figure how to solve that problem. LPs hate that. It's the worst thing that can happen to them. It's probably worse than investing in a VC firm that stays together, doesn't produce returns. I think probably worse is a VC that doesn't stay together, breaks apart, because then you have an extra problem. So the job of an LP is to manage, is to understand how this GP team is managing the friction of their investment process. And you cannot answer with, well, we have this culture, because the LP is smart and would say that's lazy. And you can also not answer by saying, oh, we trust each other a lot. Because trust and culture is exactly the same answer. It's lazy. Now, why and how do you trust each other, which is what is your investment process that allows you to reach conviction while managing friction? And I think that's the key that every LP needs to ask and know and be told clearly.
Got it. I want to leave 1 minute for Q&A at the end here, but if there's one piece of advice for the Austin ecosystem as we think about building a compounding community, what would it be?
Hopefully, if anything comes out of this conversation, if you're a founder in the room, is measure your success by the size of your influence on your network. It compounds magically. And if you're in charge of Austin, if you're king of Austin or you know, mayor, whatnot, whoever role you may have, is retention of talent matters more than anything. If you have your best founders and their people leave Austin because they don't want to live here because of taxes, because of crime, because of lack of good schools, because of anything, you lose a whole generation of talent. The one thing that Silicon Valley has, again, they've been having this replication of ecosystem multiplier effects for 70 years, but people stay there. And other parts of the world haven't been able to do that. They start, they don't retain people, and then they start all over. So that's my advice.
So measure your success by retention and influence. That makes sense. I think we have time for just 2 questions, if there's any questions in the audience for Fernando.
So I think my main question is, in the
I don't, I can only answer from a personal opinion. It's, I think that the startups, the AI native startups that are winning markets quicker and faster are startups that are delivering a service, a full service. And if you think of pretty much all of those startups, the Harveys of the world, the whatnot, they're literally doing the job of analysts or associates much faster, much cheaper, much better. And I go back to the predictability of inputs and outputs. If it's highly predictable and a startup comes to solve that tackle through agents, that's where you want to invest, I think. Anybody that comes up with saying we're going to work in unpredictable inputs and outputs with AI, I don't see it, I don't buy it, at least not today. So I think you have firms like Emergence. They shifted from SaaS to enterprise and now from enterprise to AI service as a software, not software as a service. So software as a service, you pay per seat. In the age of AI, that doesn't exist anymore. Now you pay for a service. And again, you're paying for services that AI can do better than humans, which is at that level of predictability. I think the best VCs in the world have seen that today, and that's where they're investing.
Well, I'm seeing we're at time, so I think we wrap it there. And I think we have Fernando around for a little bit, if maybe there's a minute or two to chat after. Everyone, I guess I'd leave everyone with Fernando's words that measure your success not only in returns, but also in your influence and in your retention. So please help me with thanking Fernando Fabre.